Mao's goal for China when he took control in 1949 was to turn them into an industrial power, much the same way the countries of Europe had done after going through the Industrial Revolution. And so he instituted a program known as the Great Leap Forward. And the goal of the Great Leap Forward was to rapidly industrialize China and to use China's best asset, that being a large population of peasants. In the first almost decade of communist control, industrialization, had risen. And Mao felt that within just a couple years, China could in fact be as industrialized as someplace like the United Kingdom. And so he really wanted to kind of get this done overnight, and this is where he ran into problems. Previously, if you remember, landowners in China were very wealthy. This was all taken away when China became communist, and farms were now run as collective communes. These communes provided schooling for people, some health care. People shared kitchens, they shared resources. And the purpose of the Great Leap Forward was to get these farmers to produce more food that could be sold, and the profits could be the backbone of the industrial movement here. But they also wanted these communes to actually produce metal as well. And so, make iron. And so the government set up about 600,000 furnaces in everyone's backyard and encouraged the people to melt down in their spare time whatever metal they had. And that could be a spoon, it could be a wok, it could be a chair, rung, anything in their possession that was metal, they were to melt down. Well, it became very difficult to cook if you didn't have a pan, and it became really difficult to eat if you didn't have utensils. And because there were such strict production quotas, in many cases people were turning their food over to the government to be sold, but there wasn't enough for them themselves to eat. And so the result of the Great Leap Forward was a major economic disaster. There was, in fact, low production and widespread hunger because people were not producing enough agricultural products to feed themselves. And in fact, 30 million Chinese starved to death during this 2-year period, earning Mao the distinction of being the world's deadliest ruler. In the wake of the Great Leap Forward, Mao Zedong had a problem where people started to doubt his policies. And so he started the Cultural Revolution to renew loyalties to communism and loyalties to Mao himself and get rid of any political opposition. And a big part of the Cultural Revolution, of course, is culture and propaganda, and so music and books and art and all kinds of images and stories in media and schools that would support Mao's ideology and Mao's thinking. But another more sinister aspect of the Cultural Revolution was the fact that Mao used teenagers as his secret police. This Red Guard carried little red books filled with quotes from Mao, and they were tasked with seeking out counter-revolutionaries, and they were given the authority to punish counter-revolutionaries when they encountered them. If you think about it, teenagers don't mix often with a wide variety of adults, but they do see adult family members and they do see teachers. And so it is teachers and relatives who were most often the targets of the Red Guard. And as you can imagine, teachers and relatives became very fearful of the teenagers. They didn't want to anger them or say anything that the teenagers wouldn't like for fear that they would get in trouble. And so in school, if a teenager were to say answer a math question incorrectly, the teacher would probably just tell them it was right for fear of getting the child upset if they were told, no, sorry, you actually have the wrong answer. And so you can imagine the result of this would be education really suffers. And as these teenagers graduate without the necessary learning behind them, the economy slows down, people are paranoid, and when Mao dies in 1976 and the Cultural Revolution ends, people to this day are very suspicious of those who were teenagers during the 60s and 70s, and they've become really a lost generation. You know by looking at somebody approximately how old they are, and if you know how old they are, you know that they were, what year they were teenagers. And it's been a real problem. After Mao dies, there's a bit of a power struggle. People were really looking at his failed policies and wanting to go to a new direction, and there was a bit of a vacuum for a couple of years there. Ultimately, Deng Xiaoping comes to power in 1978, and he rules until his death in 1997. And he's responsible for putting China on its current track with the 4 modernizations that he started in 1981. And the goal was to reform the economy, focusing on agriculture, industry, science, and the military. And what he allowed for, and what previous communist rulers didn't, was the notion of allowing free market sales, allowing some private businesses, allowing families to own farms rather than having all the farms be, collective communes. The economy improves, the standard of living improves. There is a gap between rich and poor, and that is a concern. Foreign relations improve, however. Trade improves, as you know, anytime you look in your closet and see all the things that are made in China. But there is a growing tension because people now have economic freedom, and there are movements that are seeking political freedom as well. And some people are calling for a 5th modernization to be added, democracy.